Hi, this is Andy Laptef at Permit IP Andy, and today I have a special guest. This gentleman I worked with at my days in the knock. He was by far one of the smartest guys there. Prepare for some compliments coming your way, buddy. So first of all, why do I have somebody on here? I've really been enjoying the past few months. We've been involved in a podcast, Art of Network Engineering podcast, and we've been reaching out to all these people in the networking community in different roles and phases of their career. And I've just been getting so much out of hearing people's stories and how they got to where they are today. And everybody's story is different, and it's just really helpful, I think, for people trying to get in the industry. I know for me, when I was a cable guy, trying to think of what else I could do in life, I thought, well, I didn't get my computer science degree, so I'll never work in IT because that's what I thought was the only way to get there. And my path did not take that route. And the more people I've talked to, there's just so many. I love the stories behind, all the people working in the industry. So anyway, my guest today, I worked with at the knock. He was doing automation before I knew what automation was. We'll probably get to it later, but I remember that when I left the job at the knock, nobody was all that upset. But when he left for another job, I believe there were counter offers, there was retention efforts. He had to spend 2 months teaching people all the things that he was doing because he was leaving. So I say that all just to say that, I have a lot of respect for my guest, and, he's a really smart guy. He's a really good guy. We're going to have a hard time probably keeping this to an hour because I really, enjoy talking to him. But my guest today is Jeff Clark. What's up, Jeff?
Not too much. Just interested to be your first guest. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Welcome, man. So really what I wanted to do, Jeff, is kind of just talk about, mostly there's two things I want to accomplish. One, how you got to where you are today, right? You didn't start out as, when I met you, you were a network engineer.
Yeah.
Prior to that job, you were not a network engineer.
No.
And today you're not a network engineer by title, right?
Not by title, no.
So I think there's a lot of cool meat in there that we can get to. So I guess, I don't know where to start. Maybe we start where we met. So I met you at a knock. Was that your first technical job?
Kind of. So I had actually, well, let me just go ahead and start from the beginning and step back. I think that'll be easier. So I got into the IT field kind of like oddly, kind of like the time we're in right now, when we're in COVID and people are losing their jobs and trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. I got into this because of the financial crisis in 2008. I was working in the mortgage business as selling mortgages as a loan officer, and everything just crashed, and we went from making good money to no money. And then the company I worked for, they went under, and I tried to go to a couple other places, but that was 100% commission. So there was just no money to be found anywhere. And I found myself in this place where I had one child and another child on the way, and I'm in this no idea what's happening in my life in my early 30s. So a buddy of mine we also worked at the same mortgage company, and he started looking around, and he gets back to me. He's like, man, I'm looking to look into this network engineering thing. I'm like, I don't know. I've always liked technology and all, but I mean, network engineering, it didn't sound exciting. So he went ahead and, just jumped on it. He started taking his CCNA, went to a class here in New Jersey, or a school here in New Jersey. And he's telling me about all this cool stuff. And he's like, yeah, you've got to come check it out. So I went and decided to sit in on one class, and I happened to sit in on the subnetting class.
No.
And well, you say, oh no, but it was actually subnetting because of how crazy, it was just this total foreign thing I'd never seen before. That was what got me hooked, because they started talking about subnet masks, and I'm like, wait a minute. subnet masks can be something other than 255.255.255.0, and those numbers mean something.
Yeah.
So I got hooked and signed up for the class. Well, then I finished class, got the CCNA, but I mean, I've got no experience, right? I'm a mortgage guy. So I started looking, and everyone's like, yeah, sure. You've got no experience, and you've got one certification, and I don't have a college degree. So there's strike one, strike two, strike three there. So I started doing a podcast. I mean, actually, like a YouTube channel thing, similar to what you're doing here. These were like 5 to 7 minute little YouTube things. I was always kind of a techie guy, but like I've heard you say before, you don't have the degree. I didn't know you could just kind of get into this thing. So I started doing these podcasts where I was talking about websites and apps because the iPhone was fairly new then, and I landed my first actual interview at a managed services provider, a small managed services mom and pop shop, and I got it because of the podcast, because I put it on my resume that I was doing a YouTube podcast, and so they checked it out and they said, "Look, you got no experience and no real technical chops other than fixing iPhones and talking about web apps, but you got a personality, and we could use somebody like you that is tech savvy, can understand it, but actually has some semblance of people skills." So they hired me, and I worked there for a little over a year. And just at that time, I was already kind of trying to say, look, I really want to be a network engineer. Meanwhile, the buddy of mine that I got into this with, he had gotten a network engineering job over at big cable company where you and I met, and told me about a position over there in the NOC, and I applied for it. And when I applied, I'm pretty sure I bombed the technical interview.
You too?
I'm almost positive, man, because all the questions they're asking me were just, what can you tell me about MPLS? I'm like, nothing. I mean, layer 2.5. I know that's something, and there's some kind of labeled switching that happens in there. And, then it's like, well, what can you tell me about spanning tree? Jeremy Chiara said something about a tree falling here and blocking this one link, and that means these other links can work. And I mean, I know that I bombed it, but the one thing I think I did smart in that interview was every time they'd ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to, I would then ask them a question like, "Oh, can you explain how it works?" And I showed a lot of excitement. And so it wasn't long before it wasn't long before my interview turned into them drawing on the whiteboard and showing me how stuff worked. And so
this is the first time I'm hearing this technique. Jeff, explain us spanning tree protocol. Well, I don't know anything about it. You tell me about it.
You explain it.
And you got the job.
Yeah.
So this is a very unique, I think, method that works.
Yeah, so somehow it did work for me. So anyway, got into the NOC, and it's funny you talked about that I was a scripter. I am not. I am not a scripter. What I am is lazy. And so when I started in the NOC there, they had just the system for opening up tickets. It was, I kid you not, when we did cellular backhaul, so we monitored cell towers and stuff like that. So whenever a cell tower would go down, you had to open a ticket. It was a 15 to 20 minute process just to get a ticket opened.
All those fields and remedy, right?
All the fields you had to fill out.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm not going to keep doing this by hand. And, because it was copy and paste. And you'd go to this thing and you'd copy that and you'd paste it into that field and copy from here and paste it into that field. And I said, look, all that stuff can be looked up. So I started writing Excel scripts and learning formulas in Excel that would look, VLOOKUP and index match and things that I could put in one value and then it would give me all the other values I'd need for the remedy.
But how did you even know Excel could do something like that? I mean, that's why it blew me away at the time, because I watched what you were doing, and I mean, everybody there, nobody knew what you were doing. It was amazing. I didn't even know that was within the realm of possibility. You know what I mean? I'm all for doing it smart, and like you call it lazy, but you don't want to waste all your time filling in ridiculous fields. But
the long and short is I didn't know I could do that. I knew that I knew I could do certain formulas, right? And I knew I could set it up so it if I had this cell phone provider and I could link it to say this is their contact information, because we used to have to copy and paste that in. So I knew that I could do that stuff, and then I just started playing around and I learned Visual Basic. But
how did Excel talk to remedy?
So that's where Visual Basic came in. I had no idea that this was possible until I was just doing some Googling, man. Everything I learned.
I was going to ask you that. Okay, you just started looking around.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all Google. So I learned Visual Basic, and when I say I learned how to read it so that I could Google, find out what somebody else did, and then kind of know the fields to change.
Was that your first kind of coding language that you learned in your life?
Yeah. I took GW Basic when I was in 8th grade, which is a very old programming language. So I at least had a little bit of idea of how like variables worked, and so I kind of knew what these things were, but I didn't even know Excel had a programming language in it. I didn't know Visual Basic even existed. So it was all new to me, but I kept finding videos of other people doing stuff with it. I'm like, what? Right. You can do that? And I just ran with it, and it ended up being a hit because I was only doing it for me. Like I wasn't doing it for anybody else in the team, but I did share it with another buddy of mine, and he's like, look, man, you got to tell management about this. It's Excel. I mean, it's not that fancy. But you're saving time. So I showed him, and they encouraged me to keep going, and I don't know, the rest is history there. So that's why they wanted to keep me, was because I wrote this. Honestly, looking back, it was terribly convoluted. It was not even good.
Think about how many tickets we'd have to write. I mean, it was 24/7 there. So across all 3 shifts, I mean, every shift was using that tool that you created, and all that time. And if it's 15 minutes a ticket on a good day, God knows how many tickets. I remember that handoff document we'd have with just all those tickets in the queue. I mean, God knows how much time you saved, every team there.
I mean, in the end, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. It was. How long did it take you? I remember when you were leaving. I think you left before I did. How long did it take you to teach? I mean, I remember there was like a scurry of like, oh my God, we have to learn how to manage this tool. Was it tough? Like you weren't teaching Visual Basic to people, were you?
The problem was they actually handed this off to somebody who did have some real programming experience. Yeah. And I remember that guy looking at this going, what? Why did you do this? I'm like, I don't know, man. This has been 2 years in the making.
He like probably was schooled in programming, right? And yeah.
So he got it, and the poor guy, it was.
What have you done, Jeff?
It was like a guy that works on airplane engines, and having to work on, I don't know, my lawnmower. I mean, it's like he's looking back at this going, why is this? It's not done right.
But it worked.
It did. It worked.
It worked really well.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I was doing something different, right? Yeah. So that's what I always tell everybody when they come to me and ask, how do I get ahead in my job, that kind of thing. I'm like, find the thing no one else is doing.
Yeah.
Yep. Figure out how to do that thing that no one else even likes to do, and then do it efficiently and better.
Did you know you were automating at the time? Because I was using the tool and I didn't know it was automation. I mean, now, that all these learning tracks and Cisco, everything's changed. Now automation is like, you're not going to pass a current Cisco exam without it.
Yeah.
So automation's like the thing now, 2020.
Yeah. I mean,
but you were, I didn't even know it was automation at the time. Yeah. I was using an automation tool years ago, and you wrote it, and it's pretty amazing.
Like I'm sure that word existed, but I don't think I even, we weren't calling anything automation.
Yeah. So you were a network engineer. What was your title at the MSP?
At the MSP, I actually I had a title that is super unique called VCIO. So, CIOs for companies. Yeah. I was the virtual chief information officer. So it was my job to go out to existing customers and talk to them about, where they were going in the future and any open tickets that they had. And then I would come back to the office and talk to the people that actually knew how to do stuff and escalate with them and be like, hey, they want this done. And they would say, that's impossible. And I would say, man, I don't know why.
So you're almost like an account exec.
Yeah, it was like a technical account exec. They did have an official account manager, but actually, oddly, it's kind of like what I do now as a sales engineer.
Right.
But it was. I didn't have to be highly technical, but a lot of it you just kind of picked up through osmosis as you're talking about AD, and at the end I'm Googling Active Directory. And,
right. And that's what they hired you for, right? They saw the podcast and the videos you were making, and they saw that you were like, you had some technical acumen, but you were really good talking to people. Like, that's what we need. Go talk to the people and come back and get us some intel. So
yeah.
How long were you at the MSP? Was that
I want to say years? a year and a half. It wasn't even a couple of years. It was it was a crap job. It was paying nothing.
Right. But
I
you
mean,
had your CCNA, you wanted to get into
yep,
networking. This was like the tech job you got without
yeah.
experience, which is a really creative way. I mean, at the time, you probably didn't know. So you went through a lot, and I didn't want to stop you. I mean, why did you start? Mortgage guy, mortgage market fell apart. Your friend got a CCNA, which is similar to my story. Guy at work getting a CCNA. I sat in on a class. I was blown away. I signed up, blah, blah, blah. Trying to get that first job is tough. Why did you start the podcast video series? I mean, were you like, hey, was it just to fill your time? Was it like, hey, I'm good at this? Did you have a plan that was going to get you some, like, I'm going to become a thought leader, right? Or like something like that? Like,
no. Honestly, it was a complete accident.
Okay.
What happened was, so I was always the family's tech guy, right? So
Yeah.
I got interested in technology because my dad was a gadget person who didn't know how to operate gadgets and didn't like to read manuals.
Sounds like my dad.
He would get, I remember his first bag phone, right? He got the cell phone in a bag that you got, and he would just throw his hands up. This thing's broken. It doesn't work. And so I would take dad's gear that didn't work. I'd figure out how it worked, and then I would come back to dad and show him how to use it. He got like the first GPS, same thing. So I was always the one that explained how it worked and it was funny because you mentioned it someone mentioned the last podcast, was the guy that read the manual. It was the only one that would sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And
it's so common in people in our field. Like I was the only kid in our family that could program like a VCR recording. That was a big deal. Like if you wanted to record something and it was over the air broadcast, you had to, nobody in our family, I read the manual.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't tricky, but it tells you how to do it, but nobody wants to read the manual except I guess for people like us, right?
So to your question of how did I get into doing the podcast? It was because I was sending videos to my family because I would have the same family members ask me questions.
Smart.
So I sent it to my dad, my uncle, and my mom. And then my dad, my uncle, and my mom forwarded it on. This iPhone video I'm holding telling them stuff, they forwarded it on. And before I knew it, I had people asking me for more videos.
It's just like the ticket tool. You didn't want to do the same thing over and over again with the tickets.
I'm lazy.
I'm not gonna call each family member and tell them how to make this GPS work. Here's the video. Here's the link.
Yes.
Really smart.
You call it smart, I call it lazy, but I'll take the compliment.
Yeah, well, like necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like here's my distribution, method to all these people who can't do things, and it's amazing when you look back and like that got you a job at an MSP. Like your CCNA, your CCNA didn't get you the job, right? I mean, I guess it helped.
I think it got me the interview. I think the season. It's kind of how I feel about certs. Certs, I don't think will ever get you the job,
right?
But they will oftentimes get you the interview because it may be a prerequisite that they're looking for some certifications or
checkbox somewhere. Right. And if you have a person without experience, one with a CCNA and one without, you at least know, okay, this guy,
he can at least pass his test.
Yeah, he's done some stuff, and I hear it's not an easy test. And wow, okay, so you're at the MSP. Was it hard getting an interview with the knock? And I'm asking because I had to beat down those recruiters for quite some time because they kept same kind of thing. Well, you don't have WAN experience. We're looking for somebody with WAN experience, and I had a hard time getting in front of them. I mean, did you put an application? They brought you right in?
No, it was, the whole it's who you know. I did definitely get lucky, and this is kind of how I feel like my whole career has gone. I just got lucky or met really good people. The buddy of mine that I took the CCNA with, he started there. He was a rock star there, and they loved him.
Okay.
And when they were hiring, he says, I know a guy.
I got it.
And because they liked him and trusted him, they at least put my resume towards the top of the pile. Now, I will still claim that I got the job, but he definitely got me the interview.
Yeah. Hey, there's no shame in that. You know what I mean? That's so you're at the knock, you kick butt there. You were like the day shift lead or whatever, right? I mean, you're basically in charge of the day shift. I remember when I started, I was on mids, and then I'd see you, in the morning. And you were the guy at the helm, steering the ship in the morning, people listening to you. So how long were you there? Was it 2 years, 3 years? Do you remember?
I think I want to say 2.5, 3 years.
Okay.
And
I'm guessing you learned, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, did you find the knock experience
Oh,
educational?
yeah, hugely beneficial. I would say that everybody should have knock experience because
Agreed.
it will drill into your head a number of things. I think one of the biggest things that drilled into my head when we worked there was, consistency and just the ability to troubleshoot. I felt like working in a knock gave me that ability to troubleshoot. And even though you'll see the same problems over and over again, sometimes the solution was slightly different. So I don't know. I feel like it taught critical thinking. But I think what happened to me after being in the knock for about 2.5, 3 years is that was a very, I don't know, in a box, right, type of job. And we worked on the exact same gear. We did basically the exact same things. And it wasn't long before I had seen just about every issue I was going to see in that knock.
Yeah.
So
right.
it came to a point where I'm like, I'm either going to move up in this company or I'm going to move out to another company. And so I started applying both internally and outside of the company as well.
And where would you have moved up? Were you looking at like backbone? Were you looking at right? Which seemed to be the progression there, right? You go over to core,
to knock, then core, then backbone, or engineering, whatever you have.
Right. Which from I remember thinking, I don't know, it seemed to me very difficult to kind of work your way up the ranks there. Like,
yeah, I remember felt the same way.
Yeah, I remember looking at engineering, and for whatever reason, I just thought, I don't think I'm ever going to get there.
Yep.
If I stay here, and I learned a ton there. I would have never done it, any differently. And and my bosses there, and I mean, I'm eternally grateful that was my first job where I had network engineer in my title. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I went from like communications technician, which is fine, to like, oh my God, I'm a network engineer. I can barely multiply. There's engineer in my title. Like, wow. Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, I remember getting to the same point of like, it just started to feel a little repetitive, and I didn't think I wanted to get from break fix to building.
Yeah.
And I just, looking at those people who were building, it just seemed like, I don't know. I don't want to say a glass ceiling. It just seemed like there was too far of a distance between me and them, and I felt like, and core would have been cool. Like that would have been a good job too. But I felt.
I think I've heard you say it. You don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, and I'm not saying I was the smartest guy there in that team. I just mean I'd reached a point where I wanted to keep learning. I wanted to learn more, and I've always been hungry in this field. I love
kind working of plagued by curiosity, right?
Exactly,
you want to learn
plagued
more.
By curiosity.
Yeah. Not that it's a plague, but right. And then when things get routine, I don't know. It's not. Some people, that's cool.
Yeah.
If you're plagued by curiosity and you want to learn more and build some stuff. All right, so you're at the knock. Things got a little routine, let's say, maybe. Where did you start applying to? What were you thinking at the time? Like, where do I want to go from here with this experience?
I mean, everywhere. You name it. I didn't have a particular place in mind.
I mean, were you looking at other knocks? Were you looking at?
No, I specifically wanted to get into core engineering.
Right.
That was my goal. So I was looking at core engineering teams.
Not edge.
Yeah, not so much on the edge.
Right, which is where
because I felt like it's what we were doing. We were doing that customer premise equipment that. The edge was
meat
fun,
and potatoes of where the stuff's happening, right?
Well, what was interesting was while I was at Comcast, it was actually one of the upper managers, not in our team, but on a totally different team that gave me the best advice. He said, look, because you could probably move up here in Comcast. He says, if you want to stay at Comcast, that's great because I'll do everything I can to help you move up. He says, but he says, in your career, you're going to get, from a financial perspective, 2 to 3 big jumps that you could take. He says, right now, he says, you're underpaid for what you're doing just because they hired me with basically no networking experience.
Yep.
He says, go get that pay raise and then come back and they'll be willing to pay you the money that you deserve. So I took that to heart at that point and stopped kind of looking internally. And I got an offer that scared the bejesus out of me because it was contractor. And I have a family, and I have medical insurance, and I have all of this. The only saving grace was about a 60% raise. So it was like, well, I guess I can afford to cover my own stuff a little bit, and it was technically a contract to hire. So I interviewed for that job and also bombed that interview, by the way.
You might be telling my story. I didn't realize how close our stories were. I mean, so let me ask you, were you terrified at the thought of leaving? You already said it, so I'll repeat it. So you're terrified at leaving Comcast and going for me, I remember like, this is a sure thing.
Yeah.
I'll probably never get fired here. I'll have a job forever. I'm taking a risk by going somewhere else. Yeah, I remember I just bought a house. I got married. I bought a house. I had a 6-month-old at home. And now I'm going to leave that for a contract where they can get rid of me at any moment. And I'm going to be doing a job I've never done before. Now I'm going to build networks. Like, were you scared? Like, it's pretty
terrified.
Yeah,
it's absolutely terrified.
It's kind of awful. Like, it's great when that offer comes in, but you're like, wow, I gotta, this is what I want. But I don't know. For me, I always have that voice in the back of my head, like, well, what if this all falls apart? You know, I have that stupid, like, well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to fail. We're going to be homeless. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be living in my car. And I don't know why I go there, but okay. So you
fear the unknown.
Sure. So it was a contract to hire.
Yep.
And you bombed the interview.
Kind of.
Same here.
It was very weird. So the interview, the very first question they asked me was, and it's actually a really good interview question. I think it was, how does a trace route work? And like, I'm like, yeah, shoot. Yeah. The problem was I put my phone on mute, or so I thought. And I said, F, I hate interviews.
You were
out loud. I was not on mute.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then everybody starts laughing. And what I didn't know was, they had a group chat going, and you've probably done it if you've interviewed people. You got this group chat where everybody's talking about the guy, and they showed me the group chat later. As soon as I dropped that F-bomb, everybody at the same time in the chat was hired. So I may be the only person in the history of the world to get fired because I dropped an F-bomb. I was 2 minutes into this interview. I mean, not even that. I mean, it was the first question.
All right. So the two takeaways are start a podcast or YouTube channel. If you have no experience, someone will give you a job. And then as you start climbing up the ladder, make sure you drop the F-bomb in a very important interview. No, that's funny, man. So
my kids can't watch this, but
well, hey, it's what happened, right? So wow. And traceroute's tricky. I mean, honestly, probably only in the past year and a half, somebody sent me a document on like how it works. It sends each one, TTLs.
Exactly.
It's a little tricky. If you've never looked at that though, it's like, it just works. It just tells me every hop along the way. Well, how does it do that? Like, that's not a fair question.
Yeah. It was definitely a challenging question.
Give me a TCP versus UDP layup here. Why asking me how tracework works? Like, that's not cool,
First question.
Okay. So that was the first question. Everybody laughed, I guess. There was more questions, I guess, and you kind of settled in.
There were a few more questions. I get a little bit more settled in.
Yeah.
And honestly, that first big laugh, it's kind of like they talk about if you're nervous when you're speaking in front of a crowd. If you can get that first laugh or you can get that first reaction from the crowd, you settle in a little bit.
It took you down. Yeah.
So it did take me down so that it was a more comfortable, more friendly interview atmosphere. And then the funny thing was I didn't realize that at the end of the call they offered me a job because I expected that there would be a follow-up interview. But there's a contract to hire, so yeah, we like this guy. He seems like he'd fit in good with the group.
So at the end of the call, they made you the offer?
Yeah, they made me an offer.
But you didn't hear it?
I didn't. Well, I thought, I guess I just didn't hear it.
Yeah,
so,
well, it's a stressful situation. You didn't think it went well. I mean, I can see that, So at the end of the call, you're just like, okay, thanks for your time.
Yeah, I said, thanks for my time. They did tell me I'd be hearing from the recruiter, but they were telling me I'd be hearing from the recruiter to talk about salary. I thought they were just saying, if they decided. So anyway, I got a call from the recruiter later on.
With a number.
And, with the number and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, I haven't even had the second interview yet. And so this goes back to your question of being nervous to leave. I actually requested a second interview myself after the job offer because I was like, you know what? I want to work at this place, but I don't know that I'm going to like these people. And I'm terrified of this job.
I did the same thing.
Did you?
It's scary. It's
That's what I thought.
I mean the same exact thing. I bombed, and I know this isn't about me, but I just can't believe
Sure, it is.
I
It's your
bombed.
podcast.
Well, you know, I'm about to talk to you, but I bombed the technical interview at the job I'm at now.
Yeah.
And it was awful. I got everything wrong that they gave me. Now, it was like some pretty intense stuff they were asking me to do. Like they wanted me to build a network from scratch, including the ISP. I mean, it was pretty insane, but I fell on my face. And I remember sitting at lunch afterwards, and the recruiter called and like, hey, they gave you, you know, they want to hire you. You know, when can you start? And I remember having the same thought, like, well, so I started asking her questions, like, so like, what's like a normal day look like? Like, I didn't, because the technical interview went so poorly in my head, I didn't ask those questions that I wanted to. And I was like, well, I need to talk. The recruiter's like, well, didn't you talk about that today? Like,
No.
you just left the interview. I'm like that because. And I want to do a separate thing on this, but like the technical interview, it's the worst part, I think, about applying for these type of jobs. Like you and I, if you're a personable guy and you can get in front of people, you can be affable, you can make them, not say make them like you, but you know, as long as you're not a jerk, like normal jobs, non-technical, I'd say that's all there is to it. You get in front of them, they like you, great, you got the job. That's part A. Okay, this guy isn't a tool, this girl isn't a nut, whatever. Like, but then you sit with the heavy hitters and like, okay, and they can ask you any question. And when you look at the breadth of knowledge of this, it's like, how do you prepare for that? So it's so nerve wracking, and then you get your butt handed to you. Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of funny how you can bomb a technical interview and get an offer. It doesn't make any sense, but you know, here we both are.
And I was having this conversation with someone that I don't want to say mentoring because it makes me sound like I'm bigger than I am, but I was helping her. She'd taken her CCNA and was asking me just kind of what do I expect in interviews, and so I started talking about the same stuff, like technical interviews, man. They're the tough part, and you have to be prepared for any question. But more importantly, don't put anything on your resume that you can't talk to because it's fair game. If you put that you know BGP on your resume, and then they start asking you BGP questions, you better be prepared to answer them.
So what did you put on your resume when you got your CCNA? Because we just talked about this the other day on the podcast. I put every technology that was in the CCNA blueprint.
I made that mistake. Yes.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's why when I sat for that knock interview, they started hitting me on, you know, BGP and route maps and how do you do this and that. And, you know, they went in for, like, I studied BGP, I think. But I could not answer the level of questions they were asking me, like, you know, what TC port does it talk on? A TCP port. I'm like, I mean, today I know it's 179, but like, oh my God, I just got out of school. Like, well, you know, So it's technical interview is awful, but okay. So moving right along, you got that job.
Yeah.
And you were in the core now? You were in the internal inside. Team. Okay. And how was that? Was that pretty intense?
It was the most fun job that you can imagine. It was just because every day was something new to learn, and that is, if there's anything I would say makes a really good network engineer, and I know you've got it. It is that constant curiosity. It's the constant desire to learn, and it's just the ability to also be really humble about it and be like, hey, look, man, can you show me this? I have no idea what I'm even looking at. And there was a really great group of guys there that I was working for, and they kind of took me under their wing, showed me the ropes, but every day was something new. I was working on Junipers, Cisco's, HPs. I mean, you name it, we were working on any fast iron. Who makes fast iron? Doesn't matter. Anyway, we were working on a variety of different gear all over the place.
And isn't it fantastic you had a group of people that kind of took you under their wing? Because think about the experience if you didn't. I mean, you would have figured it out, but it would have been a lot more painful. Like, oh my God, what am I doing?
And it's funny when you've seen this, when you first meet those guys that have been doing this at that company, it's like in your mind, they are these like giants. Mm-hmm. Like, I will never be able to do what these guys do. And it's just, but the longer you're there, the more you do it, the more you pick it up, the more comfortable you feel. You start having those technical discussions and then realize that, you're contributing to that conversation.
Right.
So this was a great gig, and I loved it there.
Yeah. But that whole time you're pushing yourself and getting out of your comfort zone and evolving, and it's kind of exhausting.
It is.
You know what I mean? It'd be nice to, just be born a trust fund baby and just chill on the yacht. But, it's
overnight maintenances, 12-hour maintenances sometimes.
Yeah.
I
got one tonight.
Yeah.
Doing my first Juniper code upgrade tonight. Wish me luck.
Yeah, that's. I remember doing the Juniper code upgrades.
I'll have a senior guy walking me through. Yeah. So I want to speed you through a little bit because you were a network engineer at the NOC. This job, you were a network engineer as well. Now you're getting into the core, you're building stuff, you're really getting in there. You got people showing you the ropes, you're learning a lot. Now you're contributing intellectually to the conversations. You don't feel as, I don't want to say imposter, but you don't feel like I don't belong here. Like now you're doing stuff. Like, look at what I did last night and it worked. Yay.
Yeah.
So I want to get to where you are now. And I think there's a step in between the job you're talking about now and the job you're at now, right? You wanted to change direction, I guess, right?
I did. I mean, and it sounds so selfish, but it's honestly true. I wanted to get into network security. So you can see by the hat, I work for Fortinet right now as a systems engineer. This was a job that a buddy of mine got, and he didn't tell me exactly how much he was making, but he alluded to it, and it was one of those that was, wait a minute. And you still get to do all the stuff I'm doing, but you don't do overnight maintenances. And you're in this security field, which is something I've always at least been security curious. And so he got me an interview with Fortinet.
Another friend that you knew somewhere that got you an interview.
Yep. And
this
is going to sound like a pattern, but I bombed the interview. But this time I didn't get the job.
Okay.
Instead, what they said to me, the guy I was interviewing with, who is actually my boss now, he told me, he says, look, he says, you got to get some security experience, man. He says, I'm sorry. He says, you're a personable guy. You've got what we're looking for in an SE from a personality perspective. You got good networking background now, because I was at the other company for like 3 years. So you've got the technical acumen, but you have no security experience. You got to get some. Sorry.
You were route and switch.
I was route switch.
Yep. Route switch, and you got a personality. You can talk to people.
Yep.
But Fortinet is a security company.
Yeah, they're known for their firewalls. They cover the kind of the wide gambit of security appliances, endpoint, all that stuff. I'm not going to make a Fortinet ad, I promise.
No, I hear you. but did you think you had a shot? I mean, obviously you wanted to talk to them. Your friend got you in front of them. I mean, did this person say like, hey, you might get shot down. You don't have any experience. Did you know what you were going into at the time?
I did, and I had zero expectations of actually getting the job, if I'm being honest. But I wanted to interview for it because it's the job I knew I wanted, and I kind of knew that I was going to have to get security experience before coming to work for a security vendor.
What did you like about security? I mean, why did that interest you? Just
because security is it's just an expansion of, at least network security, which is really kind of what my bailiwick is. It's just an expansion of networking. It just takes that layer 1, 2, 3 and keeps going up the stack.
Right.
And so it didn't feel too daunting, because as my friend was telling me about it, I'm beginning to realize that, so there's a lot of routing in there. And there's a lot of, okay, I understand how that basically works. And so it didn't feel like it was so far out of reach. And I knew that there's good money in security, and it's interesting, and it's got a lot of stability. And the company I was working for, as great as the company was to work for from a learning perspective, they're a company with all these ups and downs and lots of hiring and firing and that kind of stuff. They're like that one girlfriend that isn't good for you, but there's just some things about her that are great. That's the way that company was. The job was great, but there wasn't a lot of stability. So I wanted to get into security. I wanted stability, and honestly, the money was nice too.
Yeah.
So when I got rejected, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. How far into the weeds do you get with security? So like, I'm a route switch guy. Like, are we talking about firewalls, or are we talking about like, the minutia of IKE phases and like CIDR stuff and like algorithms? Like how intense is it?
As an SE, I don't have to dive into most of that stuff, right? We're mainly talking about features and some of the things that are make us unique, and SD-WAN, and it's you don't have to go so far into the weeds because I'm part of the sales team, so I'm working as a technical person on that, and I'm dealing with other engineers.
And nobody's going to ask you that
Yeah,
nonsense. I
yeah,
guess,
they're not
right?
going
They
to
don't
ask me that
care,
because
like, it's
they
not
don't care.
relevant.
There'll be questions about how do I create a policy that does this, or how do I do conditional advertising on a BGP route? That
Right.
kind of stuff comes into play, but it's fun because I get to go and take customer questions and new designs and new scenarios and then build it in my lab. And if I break it, no one cares because it's just my lab. And I don't have.
And you're doing it 10 o'clock in the
morning.
morning on a Tuesday. It's not a Sunday maintenance window.
Exactly. It's not a Sunday maintenance window.
All right.
The problem is I do find myself 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes wanting to get back to that lab. So I'll wake up and head out to the camper where I work. And
you got it bad, man. You got it. So I want to get you through this story because probably what I forgot to mention earlier is I'd like you to teach, show me something I don't know for like 5 or 10 minutes. So I think you're going to walk me through, a firewall, but I want to get you through your story. So your buddy got you the interview at Fortinet. You bombed. They asked you questions you didn't know the answers to, I guess. They said, you got to go get some experience. What did you do then?
The same buddy happened to actually be the SE for the Philadelphia School District. And I can say that because I'm still really good friends with my boss there. And so he got me that interview also.
Okay.
And that interview I nailed.
And that was a security job?
It was a security job, but what they were really looking for was somebody who had really strong networking chops, because most of the role there was going to be network security. I was going to become the senior security engineer there, but it was on their big daddy firewalls.
You had no security experience at the time, right?
None.
Were you dabbling like at home playing with virtual? Okay, like you just.
I wish I was, but I was not. So I would love for the story to be yes, but
how did you nail? How did you nail They really just needed a network guy, I guess, and they were going to teach you security, kind of.
I think I went in, and by the time I got to the job at the Philadelphia School District, I had enough experience that I was confident going into an interview to talk about what I knew.
Yeah.
The Fortinet interview, I wasn't comfortable because I knew I didn't know what was going on there. And the Philly School District, when I went in and they asked me a first couple of questions, I was able to kind of talk about all the projects I'd done. I had a book of a book of things that I had accomplished that I could talk about. And so from that perspective, I went in, knowing change management and, writing change plans and a lot of stuff that they weren't doing.
They were the first questions they were asking. They weren't nailing you with like hard security questions up front, I guess, right?
No, because I went in and let them know I didn't have security experience, but I was a network guy.
Okay.
And so the conversation, the tone changed to, so tell us what you do, what you've been doing, and, why you want to get into security. So.
When do you tell them that? Like, hey, you're looking for a security engineer. I'm a network engineer who's interested in security, and I'm coming in for an interview. Okay, so like, they call you up, let's talk, and right. So you're up front, which is right.
Yeah, because they know the answers to the questions. Mm-hmm. So don't try to BS them because they're going to know. So I wanted to get ahead of that. So I let them know. Look, I'm very interested in learning security. I'm a network guy. Been working on large networks, global networks. I can learn on the job.
And they wanted to teach you, and they did. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And it really was not hard to learn security after having been a network guy. So I worked there. Had a great boss who asked me the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I told him I wanted to be an SE for Fortinet. And we were a Fortinet customer. And to his credit, he's the only boss I've ever seen do this. There was a Fortinet position that opened up for an SE role. He knew about it before I did. And he told me about it. He's like, Jeff,
wow.
Look, I don't want to lose you, man. He says, but this is kind of that position you want. So I'd been there for a little over a year only at the school district. He says, they got a position. You need to go apply. So I did. The rest is history.
What a solid move. Was he a security guy, I'm guessing?
Yes, he was in my role previously and then got promoted to manager. So he was a technical manager, which is always, it's really nice to have technical managers. Not all of them are. Right. But he was a very technical manager, and I learned a ton from him. It was great.
And it's so comforting for me to hear that security isn't, I don't want to say it's not tough to learn. I'm sure it's Sure, it can be, but for me, for whatever reason, I've never been in a firewall. The ones in the networks I work in are transparent. They're not in drawings. I don't know where they are. So they're these magical boxes that I can't see. They're not in drawings. I can't log in. And if there's a connectivity issue, all I can do is, bring them into the conversation, say, hey, can you check, the rules in the NAT and, blah, blah, blah. So, but I'm interested in learning it, which is why I'm really excited to, what you're going to show me in a little bit. But so you were there for a year, and I guess you start logging into firewalls there. They're showing you what to do. Here's how we create policies. Here's zones. I mean, I'm just throwing firewall terms out that
all of those things
I know
are
very
real.
little, but right. I'm trying to pretend I know what I'm talking about. What was it? Was it intense? Was it more laid back? Were you just managing existing roles? Were you doing like gear refreshes? What kind of work did they have you doing?
So a lot of it was just day-to-day updating policies, creating policies. I liked to joke that my job was to keep children from watching porn. But
school district. Okay,
yeah,
so
right. So a lot of it was figuring out how those
like,
little snuts are figuring out ways to get around us. What do we do? So a lot of it was kind of that, that back and forth. While I was there, I also got to intern. So I had an intern that worked for me. That was awesome.
Oh, that's cool. So like content filtering was a big thing. Like we can't have the kids doing
content filtering was a big thing.
Huh.
I got to do a migration from Palo Alto over Fortinet. So that was kind of a fun thing to take an old configuration from a firewall. I learned a ton from that just because you look at this and go, okay, I have to know how this configuration works because I'm going to mirror this on a new piece of equipment. So if you've gone
not
from
a copy and paste,
it's like going from Cisco to Juniper or
right.
even just to like Nexus switches if you're putting in Nexus switches for the first time.
Even just going from different models. I remember doing like 7204, whatever they are, those VXRs, the old 7200 routers, and I was upgrading the ASR 1002Xs, and it was just such a nightmare to try to get this config to work over here. Like, hey, we went from CBAC to like now we do zone-based firewall, and it's like it just, it was so. But you learn a ton, to make that.
Learned
work.
a ton,
yeah.
but I will say that it was a nice gradual growth because they didn't have any major fires I had to put out for the most part.
Were you on call? Like, were you getting called at night or any of that stuff?
No. I mean, it's school district. Everybody's gone, right? It's not a 24/7 operation. So everybody leaves at the end of the day, and so do I.
Yeah, right. That's really nice. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Did you have like maintenance windows? Were you doing work on Sundays?
Yeah, we had these horrible 3-hour maintenance windows that were at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you blew up something in the network, well, you better have it fixed by the time school starts because you're affecting 300,000 people.
Wow.
And so that was the one real drawback there was getting more than 3 hours for a maintenance window. I'm like, that doesn't give me enough time if something breaks to get to troubleshoot it and then fix it.
So one day a week, like Sunday, 3-hour window kind of thing, or
actually you could schedule it anytime. There weren't that many overnight maintenances.
But 3 hours isn't a heck of a lot of time, especially for a big migration or something like that.
Yeah, and that was the only ones you had to do during the maintenance window. You want a firewall policy changed?
Right,
I'd just
push it. Yeah.
So.
Awesome, man. Okay, so you did that for a year, and then this super cool, awesome boss that you're still friends with says, hey, Fortinet has a position. You apply for that, and I'm guessing you nailed it because you had a year of experience. Was it with the same guy who interviewed you the first time?
It was with like 5 different people.
Oh, wow.
It was. I think in the end, it was like a 7-step interview. At least 6 or 7. That sounds about right. I don't think I'm exaggerating there.
But the first one, you fell on your face first time around. So now you've been at school district a year, and the first one you were able to breeze through. You had some experience. You knew what they were talking about. Okay.
Yep. Just because now you've picked up the terms. So a lot of the stuff that you learn in security, you realize that, these are terms I'm already kind of familiar with. It's a little bit of a different language, like stateful firewall, stateless firewall, stuff like that you may have heard these words, but I mean, 10 minutes on YouTube, you can figure out what that means.
Right.
And because it mainly builds on networking, it wasn't hard to pick up. The second interview my next round of interviews was great because they were phone interviews, and I had my notes sitting in front of me on this interview. It was much more laid back, much more comfortable. I knew what I was doing at that point.
And if they ask you something you don't know, what's your tact? You just say, like, hey, I'm not familiar with that, but I'd love to learn it. Like, how do you handle that stuff? Or did you really know most of what they were asking? You didn't get too tripped up?
a lot of, if they were to ask me something that, like, so for example, web application firewalls. I work here and I still don't know much about web application firewalls.
Right.
But what I had done was I had done some research before on like Glassdoor and looked at interview questions. So some of these questions I knew were coming. And so I had done a quick research so I could talk at least enough to say, I know that a web application firewall does blah, 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 but I've never worked with one. I couldn't even, I could barely spell it, a couple weeks ago, but I know this.
Common interview questions for security positions kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there were some common ones.
Okay.
And then anything you don't know, just tell them you don't know. So I've never worked with that. Interested to learn it, but I've never worked with it. Because again, they know the answer to the questions they're asking. Can't BS your way through a technical interview.
Right. And how long you been there now?
I've been here since October of last year. So I don't know what, almost a year now. What, 10 months?
So at the school district, were you still a network engineer? I'm hung up on title here.
It was, I was the senior security engineer, but it was really on network security. So I wasn't dealing with antivirus or any of that crap. Just
Sure. Okay. So you went from network engineer to senior security engineer. Now your title is sales engineer?
Yeah, sales engineer, systems engineer. They depend on who you ask. But
And do you love it?
I love it. It's the greatest job ever. I get to play with shiny objects all day.
And I guess it sounds like your day to day. There's a lot of labbing. I mean, are you? There's a sales team, so you're not a sales guy. I mean, there's sales in your title, but are you expected to? Because I have a little bit of sales experience. Like I have a sales background, and I've been working in the technical field for about a decade. So I've often thought like if I were ever to I used to sell used cars. I would never ever do that again. But I was good at selling stuff, but I've thought since working in tech, like, if I ever did get back into sales, a technical kind of sales thing, might be pretty good. But my experience in sales is you work, 60, 70, 8 hours a week, nights, weekends, holidays. It's awful. That's
not this. This is business to business. So you're working people's business hours.
Yeah.
No, CISO or engineer's going to want to take a call after hours. They want to talk to you during the normal day.
Yeah, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Yeah, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So basically my sales guy controls my schedule, and I get on the calls and field the technical questions. Biggest thing you have to be able to talk. You have to be able to do something that I called myself when I was doing the podcast, which was I translate geek into English. So you have to be able to translate geek into English because not every person that you're talking to is going to be technical. Sometimes you're talking to that bean counter, but he wants you to be able to justify why are they going to rip out this old thing that they know and put in this new thing they don't. So you have to be able to talk. You have to be able to translate that technical problem they're having, give them a solution, but in just plain English.
Analogies, metaphors, kind of related to something they know. Yeah. Okay.
And then you have to be technical enough to be able to sit on with their engineers and show them how to build this thing. Here's how it works.
So I'm a network engineer. I build and maintain networks. Have 7 years experience if you count the 2 years at the NOC, which I do because I was a network engineer by title. So if I wanted to be a sales engineer in security, I would probably need to go find a security job somewhere, put in at least a year. I mean, a year doesn't seem like much to me. I'm assuming you'd need a few years maybe, but
I think normally they would probably want more than a year, but
yeah.
I happen to be lucky because I interviewed with the same guy that liked me before.
Right.
And on my interview, I reminded him, he told me to go get security experience, and I went and got security experience. So at this point, he had no excuse not to.
You told me, and I did it, and I'm back.
That's right.
And it wouldn't be enough. So for me, hypothetical here, I'd have to go get experience. It's not enough for me to build, a Palo and a FortiGate and like all this stuff in my home lab and play with it over the course of a year or two and try to get acclimated. They want real experience. They want you to have enacted security policy in a production environment, probably, right?
It certainly helps.
Yeah.
There are some guys that's not the road they took. It's like network engineering, right? You came here as a cable guy. I came here as a mortgage guy.
Yeah, right.
You get to this position in a variety of different ways.
Right. Yeah. And I guess experience is experience. And it depends on who's interviewing. A guy might be like, wow, you've been labbing for a year? More than half my guys, this is amazing. Or,
Yeah, exactly.
You really need to just work in the job and to be, because you're going to be talking to security people. So This has been awesome. I love your story. What I'm really excited for, I've never been in a firewall.
Uh-oh.
And what I'd like, and I won't be in one now, you will be, but what I'd like to do with this with these series is have the guests after they tell their story, show us something, teach us something. So what are we doing here? Are you gonna hop into a firewall?
Yeah, so what I figured I would do is, since you talked about my automation, I thought I'd show you what I use here in my own house. That is a fun little script that also ties into my firewall policies that I use to ground my children when they misbehave. And I know it sounds silly, but
You shut all the devices off?
Yes, absolutely. So, you talk about necessity being the mother of invention. It was like, man, these kids are driving me bonkers, and they're now at the age where it's, they're not getting spankings exactly. So it's like cutting off their access is huge. So
this is fantastic. I send my kids to their room when they won't listen. I'm all for what you're doing. I think that's much more effective. I mean, they probably perk up and pay attention when you shut everything down, right?
Well, they do. It really helps. So
what are we in here? What is this?
So this is my FortiGate at home. This is my little firewall. It's just one of the little desktop size firewalls. But these are all our firewall policies here.
Is this a device? I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you an annoying question.
This is a hardware device, yes.
This is a hardware device. And where is it plugged in? At your edge?
Yep, this is plugged right into the modem. I've got my modem in transparent mode. My firewall, its WAN interface has the public IP that I got from Comcast.
So what does transparent mode mean? They're not doing like DHCP for you?
Yeah, so the modem is not, it's Comcast modem / router thing.
Yeah. You just need the public from them. That's all you want.
Yeah, it's bridge mode is, I think, actually what the technical term is.
Okay.
Yeah, I call it transparent, but it's bridge mode.
And bridge mode just means turn off all those functions, including firewall in your Comcast modem. Just give me an IP and I'll do what I want with it.
It's like, give it to me.
Were you able to do that yourself, or did you have to call them and have them do it?
I think you can normally do it yourself. I don't remember. It's been a while.
I'm only asking because I remember doing this when I was a tech for Comcast. People would want bridge mode, and I remember I didn't have authority to do it, and they'd have to call, and it was a fight. But anyway, okay, so you're plugged in directly. You're in bridge mode.
Yeah. So anyway, so this actually functions as my firewall functions as my router. It functions as partly a switch with all my different subnets or LAN.
It's doing your DHCP for you.
It's doing my DHCP in this case. DHCP. I have a DNS server running in VMware.
DNS server running in VMware. Okay. Yeah. So when any network device needs DNS, it just calls over there and gets what it needs. And
yep. So I just configured DNS here in the firewall so that when it gets pushed out through DHCP, it sends out the DNS server that I've built there. But so this is your first firewall policy, man. I'm excited. And I know I gotta be quick because you got only a few minutes before your maintenance.
Well,
but
we got. Oh yeah, look at that. All right. Well, sorry. Do what you can. We could go a little over.
So anyway, this is a policy ID 40. I'll show you why that's important later. This is my ground Layla policy. Layla's my daughter. And you'll notice a lot of the stuff like networking. Here's my incoming interface. This is my home LAN. That's just you talked about zones. This is actually technically a virtual switch on this interface. Okay. So anything coming in my home LAN going out the WAN. So that would be internet traffic, right? So in my home LAN, out my WAN interface, coming from source, and I've got her devices in here because they're assigned through DHCP. They've got DHCP reservations. So there's Layla's iPhone. Here's her Roku and her Chromebook, and I think that's all the devices she has right now. So all these devices are in here. So anything that starts with those source IP addresses to really any destination that's out here on that WAN interface, then those are going to be denied. So it's super simple. Now you'll notice that this policy is it's actually not enabled right now.
So it hits the firewall and just dies. She can't get out.
Right. If I had this policy enabled.
Does she not know to turn Wi-Fi off and go over cellular?
Well, so I can control that through like the Screen Time app on the iPhone.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I have to.
You've thought of it all.
She has figured that out. It didn't take long. So
it's a cat and mouse game. Security,
it's a two-step process. Yes, it is very much a cat and mouse game.
I've always heard security is, even with your kids. All right, but that would be for another time, how you block cellular. But okay. Do you have to statically define those IPs on her devices? Like if it grabs a different IP, then what?
Yeah, so I got them through DHCP. So I just made a DHCP reservation for him. So when I got them in there, I reserved those in.
Assign it to those devices,
Yep.
time to the max or whatever. Okay.
Yep, exactly. So
Gotcha.
it'll get the same IP every time it connects. And it's just reserved for
So this is a policy that exists, but it's not enabled.
Correct. So, in order for me to just block her stuff, I could just log into the firewall and do that. But where's the fun in that? Because, I have to log in and I have to click buttons and all that.
Well, you have to threaten her with your phone probably, right? Like, don't make me press the button.
That's exactly right. So I wrote a bash script. Now, you're familiar with Python, bash, or shell, whatever you want to call this.
Bash is like the Linux shell. Is that correct or no?
It's just your Linux shell. So you'll notice down here when I want to SSH to a device, the command is pretty easy. SSH, my username at my IP address. And all this thing does is it logs in, it prompts me, it says, who are you grounding, Layla or Logan? If I choose Layla, then it says, okay, we're going to say that Layla is tied to policy ID 40. So when we go back over here to my FortiGate, and I clicked on the wrong button, and I go to my policies, Layla was policy ID 40. Come on. There we go. Layla's policy ID 40. Logan, policy ID 39. So it says, if I chose number 1, which is Layla, then I'm going to now have this thing called policy ID. That's going to be 40. And the child's name is going to be Layla. So if Logan was picked and that was number 2, then it would be policy ID 39, which tied to Logan, and puts his name. And if I didn't answer any of those, it just says whatever, and it kicks me out of the script. So after it does that, it says, are you grounding them or am I ungrounding them? So if I'm grounding my kids, what it's going to do is when it runs in and does that SSH stuff, if I'm grounding them, it's going to set the status to enable, kind of like turning an interface, adminning it up or adminning it down. So all it does, it would just set the status to enable. If I'm grounding them, or if I'm ungrounding them, it just sets the status to disable. And obviously, if I don't answer either of those, it kicks me out. Then just simple logs in, goes in, and it runs these configurations. So config firewall policy. This is if I was in the CLI, this is what I type: config firewall policy, edit, and then policy ID. So normally, if I was doing this manually, I'd say edit. Remember, I said policy ID 40 was Layla's. Well, we defined that as a variable up here. So when it says policy ID, it says, well, edit policy ID. What this really means is if I picked 1 for Layla, policy ID for Layla is 40. So it goes config firewall policy, edit policy 40. And then it's going to say set the status to, well, was I grounding her? Because if I'm grounding her, then the status is going to be enable. If I'm ungrounding her, the status is disable. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it's going to go in.
This is really cool.
And you can do this in your Cisco switches or your firewall or your routers or whatever. So it goes in, config firewall policy, edits the right policy, sets the status, and end. So what you really want to do.
It's cool. The more code I read, the more it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
If I read this a year ago, I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But, I kind of just keep banging it into my brain and it starts to slowly percolate and make sense.
And learning to read code, I think, is far more important than learning to write code because you can just take someone else's. So I'll end it with actually running the script here. So it says, who am I grounding? I'm going to ground Layla.
So where did you pull this up?
So this is in, sure.
Can you do this on your phone or?
Yes, I can run this from my phone as well. I just have to go into this jump box that I have here.
Okay. So you have like an app that gets you into a jump box or something or?
No, actually, you have it too. It's on your phone. There is the shortcuts app that you can get.
I've never used it.
And there, one of the options in that shortcuts is SSH. So I can SSH in and run the command ground.
Wow.
Which is the name of my script. So then it says, who am I going to ground? 1 for Layla. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to actually ground her because I'll kick her off Roblox or something like that. So I'll say unground since it'll just do the same thing. It goes in, asks my password, which I can't remember. There we go.
So you have an Ubuntu jump box sitting.
Yep. Exactly. It could be Ubuntu, CentOS, whatever. So it logs in, just runs all my commands and says, congratulations, Layla has been ungrounded by setting policy ID 40 to disable. That's it.
Why do you have a jump box? I know I should probably know this, but why did you set up a jump box?
I set up a jump box for just for specifically running scripts. It makes it really easy to have scripts running in Linux, and it just kind of gives me a central place that even if I'm not sitting at home, I can log into my jump box from anywhere in the world by just VPNing into my house, log into my jump box. My wife wants me to, I don't know, get some movie for her or go and ground the kids. I can do it anywhere in the world. So I just have the jump box mainly for running scripts.
Right.
I don't think I have a whole lot of interesting stuff in there. There's a few scripts right now, but yeah, and it's so lightweight and easy to build. I've got a server, so why not turn up a small Linux box?
What kind of server?
You do
you
with a Raspberry.
Now you're getting me excited. What do you have?
Dell R710.
Ooh,
off of eBay.
R710.
You get it for like $130.
Everybody loves the Dell R7s. They seem really, really good. How much did you pay for it?
It was like $130, and I had to throw a bunch of RAM in it, which cost me another $200.
It came with nothing, right? No RAM, no storage.
I think it came with like
a little bit,
30 gigs of RAM, which just wasn't enough. So
wow,
I found a site that you can use RAM cheap. And
do you have one or two?
One server or two servers? I have one server.
One server. I scored one off work years back in HP, which I love, and I'm gonna have to get a jump box up. But now what I want to do is get a second one because I want to learn some vMotion and move some VMs.
I know.
Now I got to get another box down there.
See, if you had a firewall at your house, we could set up an IPsec tunnel between our two houses, and then we could do vMotion across that IPsec tunnel.
Well, it was a question I was going to ask you. So how do you VPN into your house? You're just hitting the firewall somehow?
Yeah, I've got a client on my machine, or I could actually go into...
Like an AnyConnect or, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. I'm not going to do it on here, but I have I've got a... Actually, I can go to my private IP.
Well, like I was looking at OpenVPN a while back because I wanted to share my Eve home lab that sits on my server out with some study buddies. And, it was limited to users, and they wanted like $800 for the year for a license. It was something ridiculous, but this looks like a much better... Can you have as many people... Like you could have 10 people VPN in your house if you wanted? I mean,
I've got... right now I've got several IPsec tunnels built already. Just in here, just several different friends. And then you could do SSL VPNs, which typically is what you'd use for like a dial-up. So meaning you're calling into my firewall. Typically IPsec tunnels are used for point-to-point. Typically SSLs are used for dial-up. You can set up IPsec dial-up, meaning on-demand tunnels as well.
But does this thing do like SD-WAN too?
It does.
The reason I'm asking is I'm thinking of like Cisco Meraki, and it kind of reminds me, is this an equivalent device as like Cisco Meraki's?
I work for Fortinet, man. It is a superior device.
Well, I mean, here's my real question is, I want a firewall and I want to deploy it at home so I can learn and do this kind of stuff. And I was going down the Palo route just because they're the people I've been talking to lately.
Yeah.
But I mean,
good firewalls, man.
Are these, I mean, I can get, an end of life Palo for a few $100 on eBay. I mean, what would you recommend? I mean, I know you work for Fortinet. So I mean, can I get something affordable, even end of life from Fortinet and deploy this at home if I wanted to?
Yeah, this is a 61E. You could probably pick up a 61E off eBay for, I don't know, a couple $100.
Okay, cool.
And this is still supported.
How's the licensing? Do they kill you on licensing?
So the only stuff that you really would have to license. So the FortiGates will run without licenses. They'll fully run all the features, with the exception of features that are live, like web filtering. Like web filtering is something that gets updated regularly. Application filtering. So if you wanted to block Facebook, for example, that live stuff, and even IPS, things where they have to have live updates, those are the things that your licenses are going to impact.
So like as my kids get older and I would need that kind of stuff.
Right. Then you'd want to pay for that license.
Is it reasonable, or are we talking like thousands of dollars to block my kids from Facebook?
I don't remember the exact cost on it because I don't deal on the pricing side, but it's cheap enough you could do it for your own house without
if I buy this thing for $300 on eBay, I'm not spending $2,000 for licensing in a year or two when my kids grow up, right? Like it's
exactly.
Yeah, cool.
No.
This is fantastic, man. I got to get a firewall. And guess who I'm going to be bothering?
Hey, that's my gig, man. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it.
Thanks, man. We did some firewall stuff. We did some automation. This is
probably
fantastic.
Bored people to tears, but that's all right. We had fun.
Hey, if they're watching this, they probably weren't bored. You know what I mean? If they've made it this far, is there anything I should have asked you? I mean, you're my first guest. I've never interviewed anybody before. I don't know if I dropped the ball on anything. Is there anything that what the audience I try to keep in mind is like somebody trying to, get in or come up, or, you're another guy who like career change, got a CCNA. I mean, there's a lot of themes and all the different people I've talked to lately of how they did it. The CCNA seems like a big one. And then like how to get into security, like you said, is, what would you say to a new guy who's, the Jeff in the mortgage, fallout, like, oh no, what the heck am I going to do next? Like,
I would actually say something that you said on your last podcast, I'm forgetting the engineer, come on, what's the name of your podcast that you're on?
Art of Network Engineering.
Yeah. You said it. You actually said it best on that, which is go in and be hungry. Go in and be the guy that's hungry. Be the guy that wants to learn. That's why, in my opinion, makes the best network engineers are the engineers who want to learn something new. What network engineering is to me is daily getting to work on things that I have no idea at the beginning what the answer is, but I know that there is an answer. And dang it, I'm going to find it.
Isn't that funny?
I love it. It's the greatest thing.
Can you imagine if a surgeon worked like that? I've never seen this. I don't know what's going on, but I got a hammer and an awl, and we're just going to hit some bones and see what happens. Maybe my answer's on Google. Like it's the only industry where you can like, I've never seen this, but I'll figure it out.
Well, it's because a true network engineer isn't somebody that knows all the answers. There's somebody that can figure it out.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, is what makes a good network, or takes somebody from being just a good network engineer to a great network engineer, is that they want to figure it out. Knowing all the answers is the exciting part. The figuring it out is what's fun.
So be hungry, work
be
hard,
hungry,
hustle, go after it.
Yeah. And find people like you or me. Most of the people that I know in this field are pretty willing to help.
Yeah.
I was telling you, I kind of mentored that one girl. The way she found me was she worked at that MSP that I worked at years after I'd worked there. She found me on LinkedIn, saw that I was a network engineer, and she's like, "Hey, I kind of want to do that. How did you get there?"
So she worked at the MSP too and found you years later. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. And I just landed her first network engineering gig. I didn't land it. She got it, but I got the interview for her.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and you helped her through the CCNA, like, cause she got hung up on stuff and, oh man.
Just something. She's a smart girl. She figures it out on her own.
Sure. That's my biggest surprise, I think. Like, when I was a cable guy and I was going for my CCNA, besides the guy who turned me on to it, the other guy that was taking it and I sat in on his class.
Yeah.
Everybody else I worked with, you're wasting your time. What are you going to do with that? This is a waste of time, money, and effort. You're never going to be an engineer. What are you talking about? We know you. I mean, and the reason I bring that up, it didn't stop me, but I wasn't connected to, I used to hear people as I progressed, I don't know if it was before or after the knock, but like people talk about like the network community and all these people. I'm like, what are they talking about? Because I didn't know anybody. I met you guys at the knock and that was a step and people were trying to help me. But like now, you get plugged in and there's just so many people out there. It just blows me away. There's so much help out there. Like you would help anybody, I would help anybody. And it's just really cool. I never knew this existed. I think I would have been, I don't know. But back, I wasn't sure if I was wasting my time as a cable guy going for my CCNA. It was kind of like a leap of faith, I guess. But it's so nice to talk to people like us. Where can people find you? Are you out on the socials? If anybody did want to get in touch with you,
LinkedIn is probably the best place to get me right now. I have a Facebook account and the other accounts. I've been meaning to start doing something more along the lines of what you're doing, which is getting out there and contributing back to the community. I haven't.
Jeffrey Clark.
Jeff Clark.
All right. I'll grab the link and maybe put it in a comment if people want to hit you up and if there's any aspiring sales engineers or firewall people out there that I know I will be bothering you when I go buy my Fortinet 61E because, that's what you got to have. I trust Jeff. Jeff is the man. And if he's telling me Fortinet's what I need, then I guess that's what I got to go get.
Well, Fortinet's what I can help you with. I can't help you with the Palo.
Well, that goes a long way. You know what I mean? That's awesome. Jeff, thanks so much for your time, man. This was really awesome. Very, very helpful. I really appreciate your time and teaching me some stuff about firewall and getting to see some coding. That's pretty cool. I will definitely be taking your parenting example as these kids get older because setting them to the room is not working anymore.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me, man. I had a blast. It was a good time.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
No problem, man.